Hello, welcome to the UIA. I'm Matt Nuccio, and this is
Warren Tuttle, President of the UIA.
And today we're here to talk about
the current state of patent reform.
Right now, in 2016, where does the patent system lie?
Well, it's actually has been developing into a rather troubling scene for independent innovators, independent inventors. The constitutionally protected rights that we've had forever in this country have gone through a lot of debate. The patent reform that I mentioned, the American Invents Act, did some things to reduce inventor rights, but it was done with a bigger goal of integrating the U.S. with a worldwide patent system. But since that legislation passed in Congress, which was passed, by the way, with both parties' involvement, and it was a real success legislatively, some of the bigger companies in America that didn't get all the reforms that they wanted have been back to Congress multiple times now trying to enact further patent reform, which is good for them, the big guys, but it's extremely harmful to independent inventors.
Can you give us some examples of the sorts of things that they're stomping on?
The core of the legislation that they proposed, and we're going to come back and talk about the legal system in the courts in a minute, but the core of the legislation that they opposed both in the House and the Senate were based upon if an infringement case is brought to court, that the loser of that infringement case would have to pay all the legal fees. It would be required that they pay all the legal fees for the winning party. Now, people might think on first blush that that's reasonable, but I would point out two very important things. In 1792, when we set up the legal system in this country, it was not a loser pay system. England has a loser pay system. We never wanted to be on a loser pay system because it gives great advantage to the people who have all the money. Because what happens is sometimes lawsuits are decided not on right or wrong, but they're decided on who has the most money and can withstand that. So imagine if a large corporation in this country were to infringe upon me as an independent inventor of limited means, and I took them to court. I could easily spend tens of millions of dollars trying to keep up with them in all the evidence procedures and all the discovery sessions and all of that goes along. I don't have the money for that. I automatically lose the case, and I owe them whatever has been, rung up to that point in time. Now, what compounds that and makes it really terrible is that the investor community will typically not come in and invest in the independent inventor and give them money that they need, because that's what we need in this country usually is capital to grow, if they think that there's a loser pay system in effect. So you're going to take capital out of the innovation system, particularly the grassroots system, and that's going to harm the whole country. That's just the first bad part of the legislation. It goes on to a technical issue called joinder, where it makes it very difficult to identify in an infringement suit who is actually infringing, whether it was the innovator, whether it was the company, whether it was somebody out of the country that was manufacturing. They've used this clever term, the big guys, patent troll, to describe any time a legal firm or someone comes in to help the inventors that are not actually practicing entities. And I know that's kind of technical, and I'll keep it simple. But basically, for inventors that don't have the resources, it takes away their lifeline to fight. And so by doing that, the big companies think they're going to stop infringement suits, but they are infringing a lot, and they will get away with things. And eventually, what they're doing is the first step in dismantling the patent office.
So Warren, with everything that's going on with the new patent laws and the reforms, are there people who are fighting it, or any lawsuits that are currently going on that could possibly change the sway of things?
There certainly is. There's a lot going on these days. This is probably as contentious a period of patent history as we've ever had in our country. So we've talked about the legislative side in Congress, but there's also the court system, which basically has to carry out the laws that Congress enacts. But you're having a lot of confusion there going up through federal court all the way up to the Supreme Court and how to evaluate patents, what's real, what's not. A lot of what causes the complication is software patents, because they're a little bit more nebulous than say a mechanical, say a toy or a houseware product or something like that. So there seems to be rulings that are coming down that are confusing and mixed. There's a lot of money being pumped into these cases. It's very interesting because a lot of folks in the tech world, especially the large tech companies, have complicated machinery and phones and equipment and so forth that would require a lot of patents, and they really don't want to stop and have to pay everybody for these patents. So
well, is it in the way of progress? Is that the issue?
Well, it's in some there's a camp that says it's progress and that we shouldn't have a patent system. There are some people in this country that think that.
Because this has happened before.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yes.
In fact, the Wright brothers.
Yes.
I believe the famous patent wars there, where the government actually stepped in and cut off their patents because it was getting intruding on the war.
Well, actually, and I just read the Wright brother book, they won every one of their 11 patent battles. It took them a long time to do that, and at one point one of the brothers had passed away, but they put a lot of money into that. But they did defend all of them. But here's the thing, and you bring up a great case with the Wright brothers. If you have a generic system where there's no organization and anybody can do anything, do you think that the Wright brothers would have put the time and effort that they did in Kitty Hawk to fly? And by the way, nobody could fly before that. I just want to make sure that everybody
It
understands.
would just be a nice little bicycle shop.
They'd be a nice, and no one would be flying. They actually cracked the code, and there were a lot of people working on it. Would it have been eventually cracked 20 years later? Maybe, possibly, but the fact is that these guys solved the riddle. And then everybody copied them, and then there was tremendous fights that went back when people tried to rewrite history. But they really innovated. You know, they flew. And so we want that to happen today. We want people to come up with this type of, say, solar energy that we don't have to rely on fossil fuels. We want to have better ecology in the planet. We want people working through the night, thinking about these things, investing in it. You're not going to get that if they feel disenfranchised.
So is the argument, to simplify, that one side saying, well, we're not going to have any progress if we can't share what's out there, and the other side saying, well, we're not going to develop anything if we can't feel we have any ownership?
Yeah, very much so, but I'm going to make it even a little bit simpler. Everybody, when they start off who's an innovator, wants the patent system because they want the protection. But once they make it, like some of the bigger companies that will remain nameless for now, once they crack the code and they start to get big and grow out, then they want to keep developing, they want to keep growing the company out. Then they shift from people that want to protect the system to, now we're up in the tree fort, we're taking the ladder out and you're not allowed up here. They want it all their way, and that's what big companies do.
Well, how dangerous is this? Is it the sort of thing, well, it'll just become too powerful of a corporation?
We have companies.
Business ethic.
We have companies that are extraordinarily powerful today that have unfettered access to the White House and Congress and get their way a lot. But that's been happening through the history of this country. You can look back to General Motors in the 50s and so forth. It's not a new phenomenon. But what the real fight is over is if you leave it up to just big companies to innovate, you'll see historically that they're more concerned with market share. They're more concerned sometimes, a lot of companies, with keeping others out of the forefront. You know, you use that case of Kodak and Polaroid. They invented the digital camera, and yet they didn't launch it because it wasn't in their commercial interest. So if you're going to leave it up to the company to make the digital camera work, it's never going to happen. It starts with innovators who do things on a grassroots level. That's what you're going to lose out on. You're going to lose out on that accelerated innovation and change that is the goose that lays the golden eggs that fuels our economy. And eventually, America is built on a strong economic development system which combines innovation with capital, funding, and resources. And if you shut that down, the country's economy will wind down, and everything that grows off that will be bottled up by companies that have it all. You see it over and over again in history. It'll happen again. So there are arguments on both sides, and legitimate arguments, but the greater good for America is to keep the innovation pipelines going and support that effort. It's who we are as a country, and it's what makes us different than any other country in the world.
Please visit us online at www.uiausa.org or visit us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/UIAUSA.